We were talking last night about sleep paralysis and how he suffered that for quite a long time. Just like before, I don't know if you've seen some of my mental health videos, but I talked about a time where I was possessed by a demon, and it was later when I talked about it after investigating my mental health, because I had a breakdown a few years later after that experience. The counsellors told me that it was a classic case of schizophrenia, and what we got to talking about last night was the fact that even though I recognise that as a schizophrenic symptom and as something that exists in the psychiatrist's word view of what determines that sort of behaviour, for me personally it was a demonic possession. Now I'm using a frame of reference to describe it, which I know is almost fantasy, like God, spirituality, the non-physical, things like that. And the science frame of reference is coming from the objective side of things, what we can touch, what we can feel, what we know is happening, and they're basing that on behaviour, symptomatic outcomes of how I'm behaving and how they can see that nothing's there. But what we were talking about was how God may exist in the mind, and even aliens may exist in the mind. Just like when I talked about last time, the psychedelic visions I had of Africa and Aztec cultures, and a friend of mine, Aaron, the Hawk we call him, he had visions of Egyptian cultures, and it seems that all these cultures programming is somehow written in our DNA and manifest when we take psychedelic drugs. I imagine that even 2,000 years from now, people would never have known of a Tesco store will probably take acid and see like all symbolism from Tesco and shit like that, and Sainsbury's and Coca-Cola, because whatever was the symbolism of 30,000 years ago or whatever, when we were running around doing all that crack, it's definitely been ingrained somehow in our subconscious. Because when I took that mushroom experience, I was transported to a land of like ornate cultures and symbolism and masks and attire that would have been worn in tribal dances, and I seen the whole enchilada of like what I would look at as ancestral memories from the first formations of civilization. And I'd say we were probably using psychedelics in those times as well, and for all you know, psychedelics probably program the consciousness. I do not know. But we were talking about how sleep paralysis themselves are psychedelic states that come across the normally conscious mind, and we was talking about, like we can categorize them in a scientific way, which is based on what we can see and touch. But if we also look at the extra dimensional properties of reality, like dream states, these are other dimensional qualities. We experience them just as real as we experience this word. We might not have footnotes from this word to bring to that word, but we don't really have footnotes we can hold from this word and that word either. So there's a relationship between the two, and we were talking about just the other extra dimensional qualities of these things, and how science can limit them and say, oh, that's just a behaviour, and they'll make an excuse for what happened in the mind. But me personally speaking, I am not a religious person. I am not going out of my way, but I do not believe that when I had a demonic possession, it was not something that I created. It was not a lie in my mind. It was not some moral deduction for me to make an excuse to have an idea that I was possessed by the devil or something. It was not like some sort of like, no, I'm going to act like a dickhead here. It was really very much a real experience, even though now I know the most contemporary explanation for that is a schizophrenic diagnosis, not so much a religious diagnosis that would have been years ago. So it's interesting to think about that. And he was telling me about how the sleep paralysis, he would experience that old, old woman and old hag syndrome, I think it's known as, where it's like he experienced the whole like an old woman sitting on his chest and would be staring at him, and he would be going, what the fuck, what's going on here? And you know, in ancient religious texts, there's demons known as succubuses, and they were female demons that would come and have sex with males in the middle of the night and torture them with like desire. And of course there's the other famous fucking Lilith, and written Christianic fucking theology and stuff like that there, and she was like the temptress demon, you know. And all religion really was in them days was a definition for non-physical experiences that were happening in the mind. So when you're having an ego splitting dissolution problem on acid, when you've took acid and you're splitting the head into different realities, those different egos, those aliens that people meet on high doses, like if you take 700 Uggs of acid, you can go to another dimension. And there's these, what they call them as Mandelbots. They're referred to as Mandelbots. They're known as an alien species we visit within our minds. And these people are known as far superiorly smarter. And when you go there in that thought realm, which is a non-physical space that can be reduced by science, you visit these Mandelbots, and they're hyper intelligent, and they're the manufacturers of thought and mathematics. That's how people like try to eloquently describe them. Terence McKenna referred to them as machine elves. You know, and while I'm talking to you here, I took my last trip there the other night. Some acid. That's definitely going to be the last trip I've taken in a long time, and I visited a Mandelbot as well. It was more on the afterglow of the acid, but I was still getting closed-eyed visuals, and I could see this organic, machine-like structure where it had like, you know, really organic but mechanical like rhythms to its like structure, and it was sitting there and its eyes were bulging and all. And I remember the friend I was telling you about there, Aaron the Hawk, he fucking talked about seeing the devil in the middle of fucking the gas yard field and the bog site. And he said the devil just fucking, you know, was dancing in front of them and all, and they could all see it. They had a shared telepathic, like psychedelic experience, seeing this demon manifest before them. And he told me that when him and all his friends were talking about it afterwards, they all talked about the same details and manifestations. So what that tells you is these realms open up consistent realities that exist individually in our mind, that our own subjectivity and failure in language gets in the way of deciphering the true consistent reality that we're experiencing, because it's almost hyper real. It's almost beyond the reality that you do perceive, you know. And then as I was saying, there was my last trip. I'll be taking a long time. I had some emotions I was confronting on it, and it actually showed me things where I was going wrong in my relationship and going wrong with my family life. And I had a really sort of, you could call it a bad trip, and it definitely was unpleasant at the time. I was saying, this is no crack here, this is fucking, why am I thinking like this? It was one of them ones where I wasn't becoming part of the furniture and having a great time thinking I was touching Jesus. I was suddenly confronting my own ego, and I was going, fuck, I've been a fucking dick all my life. I have been a fucking dick. Why am I not doing that? Why am I not doing that? Oh, I should be doing that. And you know, you can look at it and say, oh, it's a fucking bad trip. But when I came back down and came back from the trip, I had such appreciation for the life I am living. And suddenly what was a bad trip and a bad experience became a deep appreciation for what I do have and what I can work on. So in that respect, it was a good trip, but I definitely don't think I need to learn more from the chemical for a long time now. Maybe a year or so at least. But yeah, it was very productive, and as I was lying in my bed talking about other dimensional qualities, I started thinking about how, you know, in those ancient times when people had psychedelic trips, they would have been seeing the same machinescapes, you know, the same mechanical structures, and those like futuristic like visions you have on psychedelics. So they would have been seeing machines in an organic age. And then I say to myself, you know, what does the mind create? What does the mind manifest? You know, and almost was thinking, did we take psychedelics, see those machines in our minds, and then did we start building complex structures out of metal in this world? And do we aspire to achieve those forms that are achieved in those psychedelic visions? So it's not so much when you take psychedelics, the drug is mimicking reality, but it's more so that reality is mimicking the futuristic realm within your mind, you know what I mean? So it's like psychedelics are very cool like that.